We shared a wall, then a secret. The first time I heard her, I thought the apartment had swallowed a storm. It rolled through the vent above our headboard. Low, breathy laughter like glass being warmed in a flame. Our bedroom shares a wall with 4B, and the building is old enough to remember everyone's business. Plaster that sighs in the winter, pipes that talk when the radiators wake. I was half asleep, my arm crooked under my wife Ava's waist, when the sound threaded across the dark and fastened itself to my name. Daniel, Ava murmured, still drifting. You hear that? I think 4B is learning to whisper, I said. She turned, and even in the dark I could tell the smile wasn't fully for me. She kissed my cheek, pressed the bridge of her nose to mine, and a second later her phone face down on the nightstand gave the faintest buzz against wood. She didn't move. She had become good at not moving. We were supposed to be in our honeymoon stretch still. We married at City Hall, ate cupcakes on the courthouse steps, and swore that the first year would be a long, fizzy Sunday afternoon. Instead, our Sundays got crowded with her yoga trainings, with my late projects, websites that always wanted one more tweak, until our hours overlapped like two hands that never quite clasp. The next morning, on my way out, I met the new tenant of 4B. She was standing in the hallway in a long camel coat, hair collected into one of those knots that looks effortless until you try it yourself. She held a box of books that had broken along one edge. A thin length of twine attempted a heroic rescue. Need a second pair of hands? I asked. She looked up fast, as if I'd startled her inside a thought. If you don't mind. We carried the box into a room smelling of lemon cleaner and new resolve. The apartment was still half in a suitcase. Framed photos leaned against the wall. An empty plant stand stood hopeful in the corner. A pale blue scarf like a soft river draped over a chair. The window was open to let the paint cure. Wind moved a post-it note on the counter until it lifted and flew. She caught it with a reflex you earn from dropping important things. I'm Daniel, I said, 4A. Sophia, she said. Her voice didn't match the laughter from the wall. Or maybe the night distorts everything. Darkness puts satin on sounds. Sophia thanked me, and I left before I started inventing things about the way her eyes did that quick, assessing flick. The kind that notices both your shoelaces and your ring. It didn't take long to learn we shared a schedule. I work from home Tuesdays and Thursdays. Her shoes, leather soles on old tile, crossed the 4B floor around 9. Ava started doing more classes at 9 too, with exactly enough time to get there from our place if you cut across the park. I told myself it was only a week. Anything can be coincidence for a week. On Friday, I found the blue scarf from 4B on our fire escape, snagged in the bottom, rung like a flag that refused to join a parade. I shook it out, carried it to our shared lobby, and looked for a way to return it without making a scene. Our building's mailboxes are the polite equivalent of gossip. I folded the scarf into Sophia's box with a note. Caught this trying to run away. Yours. When I was halfway up the stairs, her door opened. She had traded the camel coat for a black turtleneck, and a look that said she had decided something since I last saw her. Stay a second, she said. I did, because people like me, with rings and decent shoes, are easy to keep. Sophia poured coffee into 2 heavy mugs and leaned against the counter as if it had been waiting for her back to find it. She held my note like evidence. Did you hear anything through the wall last night? She asked. Not coy, more like a dentist asking if something hurts when they press. I heard laughter, I said, storm-like laughter. She smiled in spite of herself. Storm-like, okay. And, she continued, then paused to rearrange her words into something softer. If you ever hear a name, tell me. We'll call it a neighborly pact. That depends, I said, on whether you will also tell me what you hear from your side. Her eyes flickered to my ring, then to the phone on the table where my lock screen showed Ava and me laughing in a wide field, a reminder or a charm. Deal, she said, and held out a hand. We shook on it like spies who had aged into being practical. Sunday delivered the first violation. Ava left for brunch with Jules and forgot her scarf. I ran to the stairwell to catch her and saw her choose the elevator instead. The doors closed on her smile. I took 2 steps down and stopped. In the metallic hush, the phone in my pocket buzzed with a text. From unknown, your wife is beautiful, maybe don't let her take the elevator alone. M. I felt the building tilt and right itself. The number wasn't saved. The tone played a cruel trick like a joke told in a library. I texted back, new number, wrong person. A reply came fast, right person, wrong silence. I stood there with the stairs holding me up, my pulse unhelpfully loud, and chose not to forward the message to Ava because I didn't know whether I wanted to warn her or catch her. I typed and deleted 4 different texts to Sophia that all sounded unhinged, then settled on coffee. Her door opened before I knocked. She watched me read her face for clues and decided to save me the effort. I got one too, she said, holding up her phone. The same unknown number, the same careful malice. Yours is beautiful, mine is charming. Both of us are allegedly asleep at our posts. Sophia and I sat at her table with our phones between us like 2 thin windows to a party someone else was having. The blue scarf had been folded into a precise square and set like a placemat under a small succulent. She saw me notice. He gave it to me, she said, answering a question I hadn't asked. Hey. Marco, she said, 4B used to be his, now it is mine. The lease crossed the hall when the bodies did not. We organized our information like people who needed proof. They weren't imagining stories. Her boyfriend Marco had moved out 6 weeks ago to the building across the alley where the fire escape leads like a sly handshake. They planned to figure things out. I nodded, because those words are a tide that pulls half the city out to sea. Sophia, I said, do you think it's Ava? She weighed my question as if she were choosing whether to open a door that might shut behind her. I think Marco is a man who loves stagecraft. If he wanted to be heard, he would rehearse a laugh, pick a time, and light a window. I think your Ava is a woman who tries to keep promises, even while making new ones in her pocket. I think walls are honest, and I think someone wants to be caught. Her certainty was a dangerous kind of attractive, the kind that makes you trust a stranger with your Sunday afternoon. We didn't touch. We did the opposite. We made space like gentlemen. When she laughed, it was easy, a softness that didn't ask to be translated. I left with nothing resolved and a feeling that resolution had only just entered the room. On Wednesday, life conspired. Rain moved in with real theatrical flair, smearing the city until everything looked like an old film. I worked from home. Ava had a private client across town. The clock on my screen slid toward the hour that had become the quietest part of my day. When I waited for footsteps in 4B, the hiss of a kettle, the murmured conversation that might be practice for something riskier. At 2:07 I heard a soft thud, then a laugh that wasn't a storm, it was a ribbon loosening. I stood without meaning to. The wall, in that way a wall can, leaned toward me. The voices were careful but not cautious. Words blurred, the rhythm didn't. I closed my eyes and thought of the unknown number, the text with its cruel teeth, and my own reflection in Sophia's kettle. I crossed the hall because I am the kind of man who likes to see the shape of his fear. I knocked. Silence fell so fast and so completely it made me smile. Sophia opened the door in a sweater the color of wet sand. She didn't look flustered. She looked like she'd paused a thought. "Did you?" "Yes," she said. "Come in." The apartment held that after sound, like the air itself was trying not to giggle. No one else was there. The window was open and rain tacked itself to the sill like notes. The blue scarf was gone. In its place, the succulent had moved center stage. "I think," she said, holding my gaze until it steadied, "we're being made into an audience." "By who?" "Our better halves, who might be worse at halves than we thought," she exhaled. "Or by someone who isn't in either of our kitchens as much as they text." A small animal part of me wanted to search the apartment like a bad detective in a good movie. Instead, I stood in her quiet and realized how long it had been since a room had felt like it took me into account. I'd gotten used to borrowed spaces. Apartment, marriage, office, all of them negotiated rather than inhabited. Sophia handed me a mug. Our fingers touched, just a ghost of contact, and heat jumped the gap between hands like a smooth crime. "What do we do?" I asked. "We write back," she said. We sat close enough to read each other's screens. She typed, "If you have something to say it to my face." I typed, "Meet me where you think I'm not brave enough to go." The reply was immediate. "A rooftop, 10 o'clock, bring your spine." "Which roof?" I typed. The dots appeared like breath in winter. Across the alley it said. "So," Sophia said, "the Marco roof." "Or the Ava roof," I said, and hated the accuracy. At 9:58 that night I climbed the stairs I had never climbed. Sophia climbed beside me. We were silent in that focused, prelude way, the quiet that crackles. The door to the roof opened onto a city that had decided to be cinematic. Slick streets below, windows lit like codes, clouds pulled apart just enough to show stars without committing. On the far side, a figure stood near the ledge, hood up, hands in pockets. My throat went dry, which is a cliché until you experience it biologically. "Marco," Sophia called. He turned, slow, deliberate, and lifted his hood. It was Marco. Ava looked at us as if she had caught us instead. She wore the blue scarf like a soft flag, Sophia's scarf, the one I'd rescued from the fire escape. The wind moved it around her throat like a suggestion. "You brought him," Ava said to Sophia, then to me, "and you brought her." I didn't know whether to step forward or backward. A laugh rose in my chest and lodged there. Humor, when it arrives with grief's timing, is a poor messenger. I began. "You thought it was him," Ava said. She stepped toward us and I could see her mouth was unsteady. "I thought it was easier if you did." "Easier than what?" I asked. "The truth." "The truth has edges," she said. "It asks for blood." Wind tugged at the scarf. The city hummed its indifferent song. Sophia crossed her arms, not defensive, but like she was keeping herself together by design. "Ava," she said, "why text me? Why him? Why stage a laugh show through the vents?" "Because a conversation with two people who tell themselves they are gentle is a room with no doors," Ava said. "Because I tried to bring it up in daylight and you both made reasoned arguments for later. Because if you can't be outraged, maybe you can be curious." Here, the wind took pity on us and let her whisper travel whole. I fell for someone I wasn't supposed to, and I didn't want it to be a betrayal without the decency of an invitation. We stood there, all three of us, while our bones reconfigured. I looked at Sophia and she looked at me, and in that glance we exchanged an encyclopedia. "It was you," I said to Ava, and the sentence did every job at once. Accusation, recognition, headline. She nodded. "Sophia came for a spare screwdriver when she moved in. I gave her one and an hour later she brought me back my own breath. I'd mislaid it for years. We tried to call it a neighbor thing. My body didn't listen. Her eyes flicked to Sophia, and the air between them changed temperature. "We didn't go far," she continued, and I knew she meant the kind of distance you measure with hands. "But we went deep. We tried to do right by you, by him." She tilted her head toward me. Then she broke off, because the next words would be a map of something we were all still drawing. Sophia's jaw set the tiniest bit. "I tried to break it," she said softly, and the wind looped her voice around my ear. "I told her I would move again before I would burn your house. I left the scarf on the chair on purpose to remind myself. Then you," she looked at me, "found it and folded it, and that felt like a different kind of fire." I laughed then, though nothing was funny. "So the unknown number." "Mine," Ava said, grimacing at the confession. "A stupid, jealous experiment. I wanted to see if you would fight, if you would run, if you would anything." The three of us remained there amid the city and the unhelpful stars, breathing like fugitives who had just realized the guard had fallen asleep. Part of me admired the messy honesty. Part wanted to close every door, bolt it, and sleep on the floor behind it like a child. "What now?" I asked, because someone had to say the question that is also a cliff. Ava took off the scarf and held it in her hands like a delicate truth. She looked smaller than I knew she could be. "Now we stop letting the wall do our talking," she said. "You can be angry. You should be. I am not asking you for permission to feel what I felt. I'm asking whether we are brave enough to call this the middle, not the end." Sophia met my eyes with something steady. There was heat there, yes. There is always heat when a secret steps into air. But there was also care, and the slow-burn intelligence that had made me want to bring her coffee in the first place. "I don't want to be anyone's accident," she said. "To both of us, maybe. To herself, definitely." I looked at the scarf. The fabric moved as if it had its own breath. I thought of the text, "Bring your spine." I thought of the sound through the vent, the private music of people who thought no one could hear them. I thought of our quiet kitchen and the space at the edge of the bed I had not reached for. "I'm not sure what brave looks like here," I said, "but I know what cowardly looks like. It looks like pretending we can put everything back in the box." We didn't decide anything cinematic. We walked back down the stairs like people carrying a mirror between them. Sophia paused at her door and pressed the scarf into Ava's hands. "Keep it," she said. "You found it first." She touched my sleeve. Not a claim, not a promise, just a proof of proximity, and went inside. Ava and I stepped into our apartment. We stood by the window and listened to the building settle as if it had heard too much. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. We held on like you hold the edge of a pool after a long swim, both of us out of breath, both of us aware of the distance behind and ahead. In the days that followed, our kitchen learned a new sound. Honesty, not tidy, not kind, but clean in its own cut-glass way. We talked about hunger without pretending it was a symptom of failure. We named the ways we'd folded ourselves. We named the places we hadn't looked because the view was inconvenient. Sometimes we cried. Sometimes we laughed into our hands. Once I cooked pasta at midnight while she told me the exact moment the air had changed with Sophia. The screwdriver exchange, the doorway light. She spoke like someone returning a borrowed book, careful not to break the spine. Sophia didn't vanish from the story. She and Ava had coffee in daylight, in a cafe with chairs that refused to be complicit. They spoke softly, went still often, and left with a hug that read as goodbye to anyone not reading closely. With me, Sophia kept her door open enough for neighborly talk, closed enough to keep us both honest. Once in the lobby, we stopped in the exact middle and let the gravity between us show its face. She looked at my mouth. I looked at hers. We both smiled and let the elevator doors shut us into our separate floors. There's an erotics to restraint the movies rarely capture. It lives in the near, the almost, the not yet. It lived between the three of us for a while, on rooftops, in doorways, behind thin walls that learned to hold quiet like a secret. Maybe that's why I still think of the scarf when the building is too still. Not as a flag of surrender, but as proof that a soft thing can survive a storm and maybe even cause one. A month later, on a Thursday that smelled like rain with good intentions, I woke to the sound of laughter through the vent again. Not the storm, something lighter. For a moment, my heart panicked, then recognized itself. It was Ava on the phone with Jules, planning a trip that didn't need codes. The laugh drifted over to me like a hand. We're not a movie. We didn't choose a bold new arrangement and announce it on Instagram. We also didn't pretend the wall had never spoken. We chose to live inside the uncomfortable middle where trust is rebuilt like an old staircase. Step, check, step, listen. Sometimes I still meet Sophia's eyes in the hall. Sometimes she looks away first, and sometimes I do. That's its own kind of honesty. If you asked me now what we are, I'd say this. We're a marriage that learned how to listen to its own house. We're a man and a woman who stopped being polite to their hunger long enough to name it without letting it eat the furniture. We're neighbors who understand that intrigue is a door and desire is a draft, and you have to decide how wide to let it blow. And yes, when the building gets too quiet, I put music in the kitchen again. Slow, smoky, nothing explicit. And I watch Ava sway as she pours coffee, and I think about how many ways there are to cross a room without breaking anything.